Okay, Lou.
It's gone 6:30, so we'll get I'll start it off with the appointment of the chairman for the meeting, please. The nominations.
Whose turn is it, Bill? Is it yours?
Councillor Evans.
I'm happy to second that.
Alistair, it's Preston's turn, but they haven't got teams, so we're hosting it tonight.
Fine. Happy to second you then.
Thanks. Right, let me just get my agenda up. Right, it's totally virtual tonight, so if you wish to speak, you just put your hand up, and I'll hopefully cheer you in order. Apologies for absence. We've got one apology which has been received from Councillor John Potter. Is anybody else?
We've also got apologies from County Councillors Idden, Marsh and Yates, Chair.
Thank you for that, Charlotte.
Can I also make apologies for Councillor Javed Iqbal? It doesn't seem he's received the links for this evening. I've tried to send them to him without much success. Can you just check that he is on your distribution list, please, for future meetings? Thank you.
Thanks, yeah, sure we can do that. Right, item number 4, declaration of interest. As this is a virtual meeting, if a member has a pecuniary interest, you'll have to leave the virtual meeting, but you should wait near your device and we'll call you back on Teams once the item is finished. If anybody any interest to declare? I'll take that as a no. Right, minutes of the last meeting. They were held at Chorley, or by Chorley, on Tuesday the 10th of November 2020. Is there a proposal to say they're a true and correct record?
Councillor Boardman proposes.
Thank you. Seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair. Councillor Morwood.
Thank you. Rather than go around and ask everybody to vote, can we do it a different way this time? Are there any dissenters? If there's no dissenters, we'll take it that everybody's happy. I'll take it there's no dissenters then, so that way the minutes are passed. Thanks. Issues and options outcome findings. So for that, Carolyn, this will be what, 4th time you've done this?
Just about. I'm going to do it slightly different today and do a presentation, so I'm going to have my laptop as a screen share and my iPad. So just give me a second while I just set up that, because I can't have a camera on my computer for some reason. Anyway, it won't be a second. You just give me a minute and I shall start the PowerPoint.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So hopefully you can all see that. Just trying to get the PowerPoint to start. Give it a second.
Yeah, it's there.
It's not letting me do it as a PowerPoint presentation for some reason. Oh, why is it not doing that? Before a second again, what I'll do is so either Teams is my computer shutting down, or the screens. I can try it now. Okay, right. Okay, don't know how I can get rid of the notes page, but let's do the joys of doing remote working. Hey, okay. So hopefully you can see that well enough. So I'm just going to give you a quick run through today of the issues and options. Has anybody got their speakers still on? Because I can hear a slight echo, so apologies if everybody else hears that echo. If you've got your volume button on or your speaker on, can you just mute it so you don't get my echo? Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a run through by chapter as the actual report that you've got covers. I'm going to run through a little bit about the site suggestions that came through, but not in huge detail. If you've got specific questions, it may well be better to come to me directly, because we may have a lot, or I might be able to deal with a few this evening. I'm also going to run through the youth survey, because we've got some really good responses there, and give you a little bit of update on the call for sites process and how we're progressing with assessing those. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing that all right. Let's move forward. Yeah. Okay, so we had a really good level of responses. As you see, just over 1,600 of those, and the majority of which were made using citizen space. Unfortunately, our statutory consultees still chose to send in paper copies or email copies in, so they haven't quite engaged with the digital way yet, but I think that may also be due to the level of information that they want to share. This just gives you a little bit of a breakdown of the type of responses that we got. So majority were from local residents, but we did also get a significant number from organisations, developers, parish councils and community groups as well. We had a really good turnout at our consultation events, and we had over 40 events at different locations across central Lancashire. So in Chorley there was one in each ward. In Preston it was chosen based on the areas where the development was focused, and for South Ribble it was done in your neighbourhood areas. As a result of the consultation, we had a significant number of people sign up to our local plan database that we perhaps wouldn't have reached as well. But there was, as expected, people still like the paper documents and paper way of working. So there was some pushback against digital engagement. And this is something that we are aware of, but is also something that is being pushed by the government as part of the planning white paper. So we are trying to look at ways that we can achieve both online engagement and also make sure that those areas, specifically parish councils and those are the more rural areas where internet connections may not be as good, to make sure that there is still enough engagement with those. But documents were also placed in deposit locations, libraries, etc. across all central Lancashire authorities. So this is just a bit of a big one, but if you've been to the local plan working groups, you'll have had the breakdown there, but this just shows you which area the event was in, so your ward or your neighbourhood area, and how many people attended that. And it's also provided as an appendix to the written report. So although it might be a bit hard to see here, you have got it in the back of your written report. So the first section of the consultation looked at the vision and objectives, and a lot of the residents felt that it wasn't really meeting their expectations, and this was generally based on the fact that they feel that we're already overdeveloping central Lancashire and we should be looking to develop less. There was a focus on looking at driving the economic ambition of the area and develop that as a focus rather than just considering housing. The importance of the city deal was specifically mentioned for South Ribble and Preston, and the fact that the economic improvements there will have a direct improvement for the whole of Lancashire, so it's important that we recognise the need to deliver that. There was also concern that the employment sites in the existing local plan are not necessarily meeting our need currently, and therefore when we develop the new plan, it needs to have a range of facilities, so small, large, in different locations to meet the variety of employments that and businesses that are looking to engage and develop in the area. One thing that was addressed by everybody, and it's a key theme throughout the local plan, is infrastructure provision. And there is a real concern that infrastructure isn't planned at the right time, or there isn't sufficient infrastructure planned, or that it comes too late in the process. So rather than coming at the same time with the planning application, it comes later down the line, and as such it's not meeting those concerns of the people living in the area. The next section looked at delivering homes, and again, there was a lot of comments made on this section. This is probably the most responded to section outside of the site suggestions. On this one, it was again finding out more information about what the actual need was and more evidence to support that. And that actual request for evidence came from both developers and members of the public. Developers' concern was regarding making sure that we're distributing it correctly and we are meeting all needs. Similarly to locals, but on the local side, they were concerned that the need is too high, and developers, are concerned it's too low. So we need to make sure that what we plan for is the correct amount and evidence that and clearly demonstrate that going forward. There's also requirements to make sure this is fairly distributed. There are a lot of communities around central Lancashire who've seen high developments in recent years who want to make sure that they aren't the only areas getting development going forward. Making better use of empty homes and buildings is something that's come through as a key one. If we've got a lot of empty buildings, why aren't we redeveloping those first? How can we bring those forward and make better use of those? And similarly with commercial areas or retail areas that they aren't functioning correctly, should we not be looking at those before we identify new land to develop? Brownfield land is the one that people want us prioritising on, which is the approach of the local plan so far, and avoiding our green areas, so our open spaces, our green belts, etc., and making sure that we protect that area going forward was a key message that we received. Rural towns and villages are particularly concerned about the level of development proposed and on within or adjacent to their areas, more so due with the fact that they haven't got the infrastructure in those locations currently, and any further development in those areas is going to have a negative impact on those, but also the fact that the settlements that are proposed aren't necessarily in keeping with the scale and the look of the area, and that's a real concern for them. Again, as I've discussed, infrastructure is a message that comes throughout, particularly schools, doctors, health facilities, capacity of our roads, public transport. They are all messages that people feel we need to be making sure we deliver better on as we go forward. And a key message is making sure that sustainable locations are chosen. So if we are looking to develop homes, they should be where the infrastructure is already in place, so where the roads or public transport is able to support that growth, and where jobs are nearby or are being planned. So there's some site suggestions that were put forward by people who were responding to this, because we asked them where you think new homes should go. In and around the city centres was proposed, and the town centres, and in relation to Preston, it was specifically looking at younger living and city living and how we can reinvent Preston to offer more for that age group. As discussed already, closer to those existing or planned transport improvements, specifically where City Deal is proposing improvements and when new train stations have been built or are being proposed to be built. Again, reduce the need to travel, so any new homes should be planned near to any employment opportunities that are existing or are also being planned. For Chorley, people came up with suggestions of Camelot, Botany Bay and Buckshaw Village as the three that came out as key messages that they want us to look at, to focus our attention on. For Preston, it was the city centre, and the work they're doing specifically around Stonygate was noted, as well as looking at the outskirts of the city centre, because it was felt that the infrastructure was there to support the level of growth needed. And for South Ribble, the strategic site at Curedon was mentioned, as well as Buckshaw, although I'm not sure how much of Buckshaw and South Ribble is left or able to meet any needs for South Ribble. Also, a need for specialist housing was mentioned. Specifically, we looked at a question for Preston in relation to how we meet the student needs, and it was felt that we do need to embrace the role that the UCLan has for the city and look at perhaps providing a student zone to meet that specific need. For gypsy and travellers, it was a recognised need that we need to cater for, but we also need to consider the needs of the gypsy and traveller community against those needs of the people living in those areas. And there wasn't quite the understanding of the difference between a permanent site and a transit site. So that's probably something we perhaps need to provide a little bit more clarity on when we go forward, if we come to looking at allocating specific sites for those needs. The ageing population is an issue that's come through, and the fact that with that ageing population comes a specific need for housing, and bungalows are one that has really been requested, as well as adaptable housing as well. So those people who want to stay in their homes for longer, they need their homes to be adaptable. And that could be people, who are younger age and disabled, who want to be able to live in a house and stay there longer term. So it's making sure that the homes we built are future proofed in that respect. And a key message that came out from all sectors was the need for more affordable and social homes, and of those of being high quality homes, not just built just because they have to be built to provide something special for those as well. The next section looked at the economic growth and the jobs. And this is something that, we feel that Central Lancashire has a real role to play for a whole in Lancashire going forward. So it's, again, building on the success of our existing businesses. So the likes of BAE were mentioned, and Amazon and Dr. Oetker. So a lot of focus on the South Ribble businesses, but there are some large ones there. In relation to the smaller businesses and startups, there was a request for support to those and encouraging more of those. And the Preston model was cited as a way to particularly support local businesses, as this has had a great success in Preston. We need, same with our homes, we need our employment sites to also be in sustainable locations, and again looking at brownfield or redundant sites first, and making sure that they are on existing transport routes or accessible by transport when they are designed. Thinking about going forward, there was a lot of suggestions that we should be having a focus on a green recovery and a green economy, and I know that's something that's come out directly as a result of COVID, but it's also came through our issues and options responses last year, so that's quite an interesting one to look at and a focus for the area. There was notable comment that the authorities are doing things to help support businesses in the area, and the Strawberry Fields development in Chorley got specific attention and a lot of mentions as a good example of where the council can support businesses developing in an area. For South Ribble, there was support for yet more manufacturing jobs. It's felt that this area has a real hub for that, and we should support and encourage more there. For Preston, there were specific comments noted that UCLAN fails to retain its graduates, and when I presented to their local plan working group last week, I did note that compared to other universities, they are only able to retain just over 20% of their graduates, and this is seen as a real disappointment, and we should be looking to do more and offer more to help encourage businesses to develop in the area that can build on the types of training that are being offered at the university. So that's something that we need to consider going forward and to work with UCLAN on as well. So areas that were considered here for focusing growth, the motorway corridors, because of their transport links, were obviously identified. In Preston specifically, Red Scar, further developing that if there's land available there, as well as Preston Summit, and again the Stonygate area. And it was also noted that there's development proposed around Cardinal Newman. For South Ribble, the Curedon strategic site is one that people really want to see a focus on and want to see something developed on, as well as the enterprise zone at Salisbury. And for Chorley, the town centres were mentioned, but specific site mention was Camelot. People really want to see something made of that site and how we can do that. But in all cases, everybody noted the need that any employment needs should be directly linked back to our employment land studies so that we are matching up our need with what is required. There's also a section in here looking at education, and this is one that was very emotive. There was a real concern of lack of secondary school places in Chorley. The concerns were really around the Whitley Woods area and also in the more rural areas around Breverton, Croston, Eccleston, etc., where there's only one particular school there, which is a church school. In Preston, there's concern that the increasing development there may leave them short, and specifically for primary school places. So they want that to be considered properly and make sure that when the schools are planned, they're delivered at the right time. But there's also a concern that actually some of our existing schools are being let down, and we need to invest in those schools that are underperforming and bring them up to standard to help people look at those. Is the perceived lack of space just the lack of space in the schools that people want to go to, or is it that the fact we need more investment in these schools to ensure that people have a decent offering where their children go? And in apprenticeships as well, this was something that we feel that we can do better on. So at the moment, we need to make sure that we make sure we give a good offering of apprenticeships and match those to the skills shortages in the area. And training should be linked to the jobs that the companies want to fulfill. So perhaps we can work with the colleges that are offering those apprenticeships as well, and the businesses, to see how we can link up more there. On the town centres and the district town centres, I mean, this was again pre-COVID, so there's obviously more changes that will need to happen now, but it was felt then that we already needed to move away from retail-led development because our town centres are struggling, and specifically improving the appearance of how they look, providing more community spaces, so spaces that people can use, and perhaps bring more entertainment or offering to the town centres, make more green spaces so people want to spend more time in them as well, and perhaps as a result of more residential development coming into those town centres, it will help then increase the uses and the footfall. It's also felt that we're not doing enough to build on the heritage of central Lancashire and our towns and villages and what makes those special. We lack any kind of destination, it was felt, and we need to do more about that. So that's something that we can consider. For Preston, it was felt that what was letting down that town centre was its access. So for employment and people coming in just to use it for leisure, it was really felt that the town centre puts people coming off going into there because it's horrendously congested, and the traffic into that town centre means that it takes so long. People are basically either taking jobs elsewhere or going elsewhere to do their shopping. For Chorley, there was concern that we needed to do more about the market town status that we have and make sure we don't lose that. And there was a suggestion that we have a lot of empty shops and units, so why don't we look at changing those to perhaps create some more exhibition or entertainment venues, or use them for galleries and art spaces. And in fact, we had requests from students looking for more galleries and exhibition spaces, particularly art students who are currently saying they're having to go out the area to exhibit their work, so perhaps this is something we can look at. And we also need to improve evening and weekend economy. And again, as I said, that's one way of looking at perhaps bringing more housing into the town centres as well. Transport and how we travel. Again, this is one about public transport focus, really. So I think we all know that public transport needs to be improved. And again, it was felt that we need to move from a car-led system to a sustainable travel. So whether that's walking, cycling or public transport, and we should try and make that public transport greener. As well as considering how frequent the public transport is. There's lots of concern that although there is bus routes, those bus routes may be 1 hour. And as such, that means that if you miss one bus, you've got an hour to wait for the next one. So it really isn't offering a viable alternative to the car at the moment. There's also concern that our cycle and pedestrian routes aren't particularly well maintained, and they don't feel safe for people who are using them, and specifically younger groups of society. And that's also picked up through the youth questionnaire. On train stations, there's requests for the new station at Cottam, and also support for reopening Midge Station in South Ribble and Coppell in Chorley. So they are things that we can look at. Again, better connections between transport hubs. So this was between the stations and the bus stations. So for Preston, it was having a better connection, whether that was with a hop-on, hop-off bus service that could service the bus station, the train station, or just better signage and better ways of linking up. With Chorley, it was making sure that bus and train times perhaps link up a bit better, so those people trying to use them can use those better as well. But also requests to make sure that there were better linkages between our main towns, so better bus, more direct bus services perhaps to Chorley, Leyland and Preston and the outlying employment areas as well. On parking, there was concern that the only need that we really have going forward is electric vehicle parking, and that's something that's needed in all areas, particularly on-street parking. And it's felt that, you know, at the moment, those people who perhaps don't have a driveway, there isn't an alternative option for them if they want to move to an electric vehicle. They've got no charging there, so we need to find some form of on-street parking there and look at that. And there's also a suggestion to have more pedestrian-free zones in our town centre, and perhaps, you know, looking at reducing the parking offered would help that. And that was specifically a suggestion for Preston to help improve the air quality there. On cycling, people felt that we just don't offer adequate cycling facilities anywhere. The only positive we've got is the train at Preston train station, the storage there, but without that, it was noted that really there aren't sufficient cycle lanes, there's not sufficient cycle storage of any kind, and specifically safe storage in our town centres, and this is really putting people off coming into those areas by that means of travel. On health and well-being, the support for the A&E in Chorley was seen throughout Central Lancashire, not just in Chorley, and this was because it's felt that it is needed to take the pressure of Preston, which is already an extremely busy hospital. But alongside that, there's people's concern that localised health centres or health hubs are required to meet the increased development that's taken place over recent years, and we need to make sure that what we plan for going forward has sufficient health support to take that population increase. But one thing we need to do as well, oops, sorry, I've gone too quickly, hit my mouse, sorry. One thing we need to do is design areas better to reduce health inequalities. So it was noted that we have a lot of health inequalities due to the way that the area has historically been designed. So supporting healthy living and designing areas better through the local plan gives us an opportunity to readdress that problem. Access to employment is also seen as really important for improving people's mental health, and that's something that we really need to address to make sure there's employment opportunities for everybody, as well as the green space and making sure that we don't lose that through new development. So there has been concern that we've already lost some of our town centre green spaces due to housing or employment options coming through there, and we need to make sure that development going forward addresses that loss by providing some form of green space through the development, or we try to protect those areas from future loss. And again, the Curedon site, it keeps getting put forward for a number of suggestions. In this case, it was looking at healthy community resources, but people really want to see a solution to that site. And again, on health and well-being, people felt that we needed high quality, affordable homes. The fact that people can't necessarily afford a home doesn't mean that what they should live in should be of low quality, and low quality homes at high price is really having a negative impact on people's mental health. Community facilities are a concern. So the community facilities aren't just those that are needed to be built with new development. It's felt that there's a lack of community facilities in areas, specifically rural locations, feel that they don't have sufficient. So how can we address that going forward? Support for more cooperatives and SMEs. These are seen to have a real positive impact on local areas. They may have specialist roles in dealing with health and well-being, or just offer people opportunities in work, training, etc. We asked a question about fast food and got people's opinions on this, whether it should be near schools, etc., and what people's opinion on where it should be. And there is a lot of concern that they shouldn't be near schools, but also the fact that some of the responses felt that the town centres are let down by a high number of fast food outlets. This is really affecting the appearance of the town, can make them smelly and look dirty, and as a result people really aren't looking to go into town centres, and they tend to be clustered in certain areas. So actually we need to think about that and how we can make those areas better. And there's also a request to perhaps try and encourage more high dining to get a different type of clientele into our town and city centre. So climate change is an issue that comes throughout the plan again, and it's something that people feel that it's not just a policy that we need to have, it's something that needs to be embedded throughout everything we do through the local plan itself. And it's a wider reaching issue than just the local plan, so we do need to make sure that anything we do on climate change we do in relationship with the county council, any things like the Environment Agency, Natural England, etc., and with our other authorities in the area to make sure that we deliver real change. There was real concern about those areas that have had historic flood risk, a lot of concern for residents of Croston and Eccleston and Breverton, and developments in those areas which are considered may have a negative impact on there going forward, and people really don't want to see any development that would increase surface flood risk. United Utilities have also commented on flood risk and water, and the need to protect our drinking water as well. So we need to consider any developments in locations that would affect those. Tree planting is really something people want to see us do more on, and this isn't just for air quality, it's to increase our biodiversity. And it wasn't just tree planting. We asked the question, should we plant more trees? People are really supportive of the work the authorities have done on their green verges, and looking at other things we can do to perhaps, instead of developing fields for housing, can we develop fields for environmental purposes instead? We're also looking to develop a policy that will require an air quality assessment for all new developments, and this is specifically to look at how we can, reduce air quality issues that the area faces, and look at how we can, improve the situation going forward. I chose this picture here of Brockles, if you don't know it, but one of the things people said they wanted to see, sort of climate resilient development, and I think this is a great one. It shows you how you can redevelop an area and use renewable resources in there. But people are really supportive of renewable energy, renewable building, sustainable options going forward. We have a lot of support for looking at passive house, solar energy, etc. So this is something that we will really look to encourage through the local plan. People noted the need that we should be having less road travel, and this is one of the main ways in which we can improve air quality and help address the issue of climate change. We also had discussion about how we can design areas to protect them going forward, and the specific concern that any developments that do come forward need to consider properly the historic and natural environment through good design, they should be able to demonstrate that they can be protected. And through any new developments, they should embrace the need to bring forward green and blue infrastructure as a means of meeting climate change mitigation requirements. So we asked people about where we should be developing our growth going forward. So this diagram here you might recognise is the existing approach in the current core strategy, and this was our starting point. And as a starting point, people said, okay, look at it, but actually there are some shortfalls there. The same point's been made. We need sustainable locations for housing and employment, which it currently feels that this doesn't meet. This is also not felt to meet the needs of all our employment requirements, because it doesn't necessarily put the employment in the locations where it's needed and doesn't offer the types of employment land that we need going forward. But again, we need to make sure that if we are developing an area, the housing and the employment needs match each other. We don't want the area to become a commuter town, and there is real concern from residents that there are more homes and less jobs being provided, and employment land is being lost to homes as well. So there's some site suggestions to say. I've not gone into too much detail here. I can answer some questions after if people want specifically on theirs, or I am available for any questions to be emailed to me directly. But for Chorley, the site suggestions were set out in Annex 1 and Annex 5. Annex 5 provided details of all site suggestions that were submitted to the council. Annex 1 provided those which the council felt were more considered suitable at that time and should be looked at further. In relation to those suggestions that were put forward, in Chorley, the majority of responses came against sites put forward in Whitley Wood, Heath Charnock and Rivington areas. For Preston, the site suggestions were put forward in Annex 3, and this included all site suggestions. There wasn't a split for them. And unexpected, I guess, for you and Preston is that the main responses came against those proposed in Rural East and Rural North. For South Ribble, the suggestions were in Annex 4, with sites in Salisbury being of most concern, as well as the existing proposed development at Pickering's Farm, of which we received a separate petition on. We also received 4 petitions on additional sites in Chorley and South Ribble, and I've detailed in Appendix 1 to your report a list of responses by site. But if you want a bit more detail on what those sites are, please do contact me. So where we asked people what we should be looking at when we go forward, they said that any new development should be away from our green belt on our areas of open space, and we should be looking to protect those through those developments. We need to make sure that we choose sustainable locations where the infrastructure is already able to cope or is built at the same time and is considered sustainable once those new infrastructure needs can be met. We need to make sure that what we build, though, meets the needs of those living in the area, not the aspirations of the developer. So it's concerned currently that the 4 and 5 bedroom homes that are planned do not necessarily meet the needs of those living in those locations, where perhaps more affordable homes are required in those locations. On regards of the edge of town settlements, this is something that developers felt was really needed, and they felt that was necessary because some of our smaller rural areas are struggling in terms of viability. And so this is something that we will need to look at to make sure that if any proposals come through in those locations, we understand what the implications will be and what the needs of those areas are, so we can address what the concerns are of the developers. We also had a question on the safeguarded land policy, and this looked at, should we continue having safeguarded land policies going forward? And the reason for this was because people's feelings towards them are different. However, the response we got was in support of maintaining a policy, however, for 2 very different reasons. So members of the public feel that having a safeguarded land policy specifically gives them the protection from that land, and they feel that that means that no development can take place there. However, developers feel it does the opposite, and it identifies land that they can focus their attentions on for going forward. So this is something that we will need to consider carefully if we do continue with a safeguarded land policy or identify a need for having one going forward. So the next section is talking about the youth questionnaire, and this was a specific questionnaire which focused on 11 to 21-year-olds. So this just gives you a brief level of the responses and where those responses came. So the majority came from the 11 to 15-year-old range and from locations within Preston. This slide just shows you the types of colleges and schools that we got the responses from, and we will continue to hopefully work with them going forward. So I just picked up a few of the issues that our young people would like or see as important about Central Lancashire. So you can see the things they like there. They enjoy the fact that there's a lot of green spaces. They like the access to the town centres, but they like the rural nature of where they live and that it's quiet. But they also like the fact that there's lots of things going on for them. They would, however, like more leisure facilities, specifically things like skate parks and climbing walls. And they did note that they don't like the dirt, they feel their town centres are dirty, which perhaps picks up on the point that was made by the hot food takeaway question. They are really considering that there is a lot of congestion and that doesn't make them feel very safe, and they don't like the air that they're breathing in, so they do want to see change there. And they also feel that getting around by themselves is very expensive. The public transport system doesn't perhaps offer them an affordable way of seeing their friends. So what should the area offer going forward? Well, I quite like a lot of the responses we got here. I mean, one of them was we should have robots ruling the world, but we're not sure about that one yet. But they do want to see more green spaces, specifically like the ideas of green roofs and walls. And I think any new development that we should have going forward, if we kind of get the green infrastructure on those, I think it'd be really good. But they also wanted to see healthier lifestyles, so they felt that making areas more accessible by foot, so we didn't have to travel by car as much, making the air cleaner, etc., and more access to free exercise was something that was noted as well. They're really keen to have a zero carbon economy, and they want their area, the town centres, to be vibrant. I mean, this is an issue that they do address. I guess they feel the town centres currently aren't offering them what they need. But they also want to feel safer moving around. There's a lot of children felt that there's gang cultures in some of the locations, or going out at night just doesn't feel safe for them. So when we asked them about what they would do once they leave college or school, a lot of them said that they will look to studying further, whether that's looking at university or going straight into work. For university, there is perhaps not the attention on UCLan as we would like, with the pull of nearby cities being something that is noted. They feel they want something different, something offered to them perhaps that Preston can't currently offer. So that's something that perhaps we can look to do for Preston. And quite interesting, some of them also wanted to move abroad, somewhere warmer. They feel that it's a bit cold and dull up north. But those who did want to stay commented that they wanted to be in the areas because they recognise how it is lovely and green here, and that's perhaps something that we wouldn't get elsewhere, and they would like to see that continued going forward. Sorry, next slide. One of the things they did feel was, as I covered, was there's not enough cycle lanes. Getting about by themselves isn't safe. So if we do look at improving that infrastructure, it's making them safer and perhaps more illuminated. We also noted as well that the 11-year-olds can be quite young going out and they get lost easily. And actually, this is something that's also picked up when you look at people who are perhaps having mental health issues. That getting around an area can get quite confusing. So if better signage is something that our youth are requesting, perhaps it's something that older generations may need as well, or people with dementia. They also say want more leisure facilities, and they want us to make sure that the future that we have considers the impact on climate change and make sure that we have something good to have in the future. I think that there is concern that we're polluting their future at the moment. So next steps for this is to publish the outcomes report on our website, and we will also provide links to the home team's website. So there'll be one on Chorley, South Ribble and Preston. There's some recommendations in the report regarding this. We also want to write to all the schools and colleges that got involved to ask them to continue their involvement and also to thank them for their involvement. And for those that didn't get involved, hopefully seeing the responses that we got perhaps may enable them to engage with us better going forward. And one thing we are doing now is starting to develop the preferred options report. So all the responses that we've received, including including the comments and all the site suggestions, are being used to look at how we work forward and develop a preferred option with some potential allocations to consider. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thanks, Carolyn. Fantastic report as ever. Anybody, any questions and comments? You've already had your own individual local plan working group, so if you raised your issue already, I'm sure Carolyn's took it on board, so you don't need to go through it all again. But is there anybody got anything else? Not seeing any. I can't see any hands up. Oh yes, we have. Peter Moss.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And really, it's just a generic observation, but using one of the more specific examples within the report, and that's the issue around the fact that more people wanted improvements to walking, cycling, and public transport options. And it's interesting that when LCC actually put up pop-up cycle lanes, everybody was screaming and shouting for them to be taken down, and nobody wanted them. And I think it's important, what I'm trying to illustrate with that point is that I think it's important that we try to listen to all voices within our area, and not just perhaps those who shout loudest or who have the best options for articulating their particular point. And I know, I have said this to Caroline, and it isn't easy to do, but you would hope that we do try and listen to those the quieter voices who may well be in the majority. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Peter. I did notice that Stagecoach today have improved the bus service between Preston bus station and Seven Stars in Leyland and vice versa. They said they'd listened to consultation. It's the 111 service, and it now starts at 5:30 in the morning, Monday to Friday, and buses run every 12 minutes. So, that's going to be interesting. I wouldn't imagine they'll be getting much custom at 5:30 in the morning, but there you go. Councillor Martin Boardman.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank Carolyn for the really, really comprehensive report. It was really good, and it's really a general question and a concern which I think she'd probably better answer. It's most of this data that we collated was prior to COVID, basically in March, and I just want to know if Carolyn's got some idea of, now that we've lived through 12 months of this, what are the biggest ramifications that these COVID and the lockdowns have had on the information that we've had back, and is there any key area which we find we need to potentially look at before we roll any of this forward?
Thanks for that question. I mean, we've actually discussed it in the steering group recently as well. I mean, a lot of the responses we got back actually addressed some of the issues that I think COVID's highlighted as well. So the fact that our poorer communities are already dealt perhaps not the best accommodation, not the best access to green space, not the best access to health or employment opportunities, and that's something that we knew anyway, but this perhaps has enhanced that. One of the biggest challenges that we're going to have, I think, is how we improve our town centres, because although at the time when we were doing this, we knew that we were having an impact on the high street already. People perhaps weren't shopping to the same degree. We've seen big names go, and we've seen even bigger names fall as a result of COVID. So this is definitely something that we will need to look at. So there is work looking at updating our evidence bases going on. Some of that's at county, but we are looking at doing that locally. Some of it will be picked up in the next report, but we have thought about how we need to look at our employment land studies, our housing studies, to see what type of housing we need. Now, has that changed? What type of employment do we want to be focusing on now? Is with people working at home, is the way that we service people working at home or adequately addressed? Is probably something we didn't ask. Is your internet connection sufficient? I mean, I know we've had comments from businesses saying perhaps that there is issues with, for them, the connections in some of their areas, which is affecting what they can offer at those sites. But actually, we haven't probably addressed that for people working from home. So there may be some things that we'd look at in that way. But I think a lot of the issues that came through were probably issues that COVID is highlighted, but I feel that we should be able to address through the information that we have.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Anybody else? I can't see any more hands up. No, in that case, let me go back. Right, 3 recommendations for the report. I'll read them out. To endorse publication of the outcomes reports, to agree to notify stakeholders that the outcomes reports have been published on the Central Lancashire Local Plan website. Number 3, to write to schools, colleges to thank them for responding to the youth questionnaire and invite to continue to engage with us going forward. Do I have a proposer for those recommendations?
Happy to propose we accept those, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Peter Moss. Seconder?
Happy to second those. Everybody's going very quiet. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, haven't they? Right, thanks for that. Right, instead of going around everybody individually, is there any dissenters? No. In that case, I will say that they've been agreed. Thank you. Right, item 7, local plan update. Caroline, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I won't discuss the first bit, which is local plan progress, because I've just told you all about that. Yeah. So the preferred options we are now working on, and if you recall, we discussed at the last Jack how we should progress with the local plan, and it was felt that we should progress with delivering a local plan because the need for a 5-year housing supply across all 3 councils is particularly important, and the fact that the changes proposed by the planning white paper will take so long to come in. So we are progressing with that local plan as was. So at the moment we're working on the vision and the objectives and looking at some draft policies, and we will be taking those to the working groups in spring, and following workshop with those we will then bring those back to the Jack. It may well be that we can bring those to the Jack in the spring as well. We'll just see how it goes there. We have been progressing work on our site assessments, and I can now say that all 3 of the home teams have completed their initial assessment of the sites that were got for. We had additional about 100 sites, I think it was, came through the call for sites 3, so they've been accounted for alongside the call for sites 1 and 2. And we did also have a slight update to the Sheila methodology, which took account of brownfield sites in the green belt that have been brought back into consideration. So those sites have now been assessed by home teams as well. So we are now moving towards doing a more detailed assessment of those, doing site visits and looking at the potential for allocation in the local plan. All that work will consider the responses that we have received through the consultation, as well as responses and information that's been submitted by the Environment Agency and findings of our strategic flood risk assessment that is currently in progress. Once we've finished that work, we will have a better understanding of the land requirements of the housing and needs for Central Lancashire, and whether what comes through that initial Sheila sieve is sufficient to meet that needs. If it's not, then we will need to go back and look at the methodology and perhaps consider additional land options that need to be brought in to the mix. So the strategic flood risk assessment was brought to you at the last Jack, and he had a presentation on that, and we are expecting the final report towards the end of January, early February. The housing study was supposed to be updated last year, but due to the change in economic circumstances and the fact that planning white paper is proposing fundamental changes to standard method, we felt it was pertinent holding off this update until we knew what was happening in those areas. So this work is now planned towards the end of 2021. And that will take account of any economic work that the county is currently pursuing, which I think is expected to be ready in the summer, and any updates we wish to take ourselves. But most importantly, we hope we have a better understanding by then of what standard method changes are proposed by government, and we can plan accordingly. There is a housing needs study currently being commissioned by Preston and Chorley. So this is basically similar to the one that South Ribble did. And we are hoping that that will be commissioned in the coming month, and with early findings of that in the spring. County have completed all the baseline work on the transport master plan. So once we've done an initial survey of our sites and start looking at the options we want for growth, we can then run those processes through the master plan work that County have done and have a look to see how those options work. So this will then look at what infrastructure needs may come forward from potential allocations. On climate change, again, County had supposedly was supposed to commission some work last summer, but that got delayed. I know that the tender's currently being prepared now, and we expect that probably summertime again this year. And that is going to be looking at how we can deliver the target of being net zero. That work includes a carbon assessment of central Lancashire as part of the whole of Lancashire. So it doesn't feel right to do our own initial work on this because it's extremely costly to do, but also the findings of that work will be something that all 14 authorities link up to doing. So we feel that we need to work with them on that. However, we do have our own budget to do some additional work on climate change, which will be commissioned alongside this work. So we're starting to move ahead on local plan viability now, and we will be looking to commission consultants to start work on that once we've completed our initial site sieving work. On the local development scheme, if you've seen the timetable below, you'll note that we were looking to go out for our next round of consultation in June. Clearly that's not happening now. This is down to evidence-based work that I've talked about being delayed for reasons noted already, so I won't go into those again. But we do need to know that we can prepare the plan and still deliver the 2023 deadline that government set us in place. So we are currently looking to review this timetable and see how we can still meet that. So I'm hoping to bring an update to you at the next Jack on that. We've continued to do duty to cooperate discussions. We've had a number of requests coming in from neighbouring authorities who are currently out with their preferred options documents, notably Blackburn being the closest neighbour to all three at the moment. And we've also been having engagement with some partners such as Stagecoach, who have had a meeting with myself to discuss the need to make sure that we future-proof areas to provide sufficient bus services going forward. But we will continue those engagements going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Caroline, for your report. Anybody any questions or comments? No, I can't see any hands up. So in that case, the report is just for note. So do we agree it's noted? Take that as a yes.
I've clearly bored everyone, Chair.
Right, next item, exclusion of press and public. Again, I'll propose that we exclude press and public. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, second.